Okay, our next speaker is Sean Webb. He is the author of a book series called Mind Hacking Happiness, which is on its third book and moving forward from there. And looks like an interesting talk.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for being here today. I came here to talk about the algorithms of human motion, which over the last year we were able to develop and test in many LLMs. And we'll go through that, and hopefully this discussion will also teach you a little bit about yourself today, because I'm going to explain how the human mind works from a generation of emotional perspective, and you'll be able to see that within your own mind, which is pretty cool. What we'll talk about is what is emotional intelligence, is LLM EI science fiction, and I'll explain a little bit about the emotional intelligence logic that we used, how we taught the LLM emotional intelligence, and then we'll show you the objective benchmark results, including some world records in AI that we still hold to this day over all of the major LLM providers. And then I'll show you a demo, which hopefully will shake the world, because that will show you fourth order theory of mind capability, where the AI community today is trying to figure out how to possibly configure third order theory of mind, and we've already attained fourth order, and we're working on fifth and sixth order. And then we'll talk about what this reveals about the possibility for artificial consciousness in AI and LLMs. First, I'd like to thank David Chalmers for taking the only picture that I have of being at the Consciousness Conference in Tucson in 2018 to talk about the base model that we implemented into AI. And I wanted to thank Stu Hammeroff for inviting me back on my birthday to speak at Consciousness, which is the best birthday present you could ever have. So what is emotional intelligence for LLMs? It's not just giving LLMs the option to exhibit realistic emotions via language. EI in an LLM capacity allows for LLMs to define, track, predict, and influence its users' emotions. And it also allows LLMs to define, track, and predict non-user emotions. So it understands the human mind from a true theory of mind perspective. And our system, we were able to evoke some fifth order theory of mind capabilities, and I'll explain a little bit more about that as we move forward. So both EI and theory of mind are required pillars to achieve artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence. So this is an important development in our ability to move forward in technology en masse, and the ability for AI to understand the human mind in the way it needs to serve humanity in the way that we hope it can. The quote that Roz Picard gave me, which gave me a lot of steam over the last decade, when I showed her the basis of this system, she told me this may be the most elegant system for the cognitive catalysis of human emotion I've seen. So the caveat here is this is the cognitive catalysis of human emotion. There are other forms of emotion that can come from simply smiling. There's a feedback loop that when you smile, you can create happiness in your brain. We're not talking about that. There's a great TED talk about standing like this and standing like this and giving that boost of confidence that provides this physiological feedback loop. We're not talking about that either. There are other modalities that need to be researched and defined for AI to be able to get a full spectrum analysis, but this will get us most of the way. Now, is this science fiction? This is not science fiction. We're about to prove it to you personally, because what I would like you to do now is think of someone that you know well. Take a moment to think of someone that you're very close to, and put that person in your mind. This could be a significant other, it could be a family member, it could be a close friend. And now, if I were to ask you for $1 billion in cash, could you, in the next time that you interact with that person in the next 3 minutes, walk into that room and provide them a perception in their mind that could put them in a particular emotional state? Could you be able to do so? And you can make up whatever lie or information that you need. You can bring up whatever memory that you have with that person to put them in a particular emotional state. Could you do it? I know for a fact I could make my wife angry. Absolutely. You could call me a professional at making my wife angry. I may be the GOAT of making my wife angry. I expect to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. But who here, show of hands, think you could say something to someone you know well that could evoke a particular emotional response? That's almost all of you, except for the lazy people who refuse to raise their hands. And you're right, because we have something called theory of mind, and it's based on the information that we have about them in their mind. There are two things that we know about that special someone that we have in their life. One is about their sense of self, which is in Antonio Damasio's science, all the way down to the proto-self, which is a logically defined list of the laundry items that we have in our mind that define us as who we are, who we think we are. And the second thing is our perception tendencies with an appraisal process. You know how they think. You know how they process things. You know how they'll react to certain things. And those are the only two pieces of information. Now, the good thing is you can actually create math from these things because they are logically definable. And this is your equation of emotion. It is expectation and or preference as compared to your perception in the moment equals an emotional reaction. And every emotion, whether it comes from a physical perception or a mental perception, will create an emotional reaction if you have both of these variables present in your mind in any one moment. If there is a lack of expectation or preference and you have a perception about something, you won't care about it, so you won't have an emotional reaction. If you have an expectation or preference about something and you don't have a perception about it, you will not have an emotional reaction. Both of these variables need to exist, and when they do, you will have an emotional reaction. The expectation or preference comes from the aforementioned self map that we have inside of our brains. Yourself looks like this. You have attachments of mind that include the people around you who become attached to your sense of self. And this is the work of Jim Cohn at UVA, who proved that the people around you actually become an attachment of your sense of self, which is how your simple nervous system can run the defensive self mechanisms, and you can have emotional reactions about things that happen in people's lives around you. You also can be attached to ideas of value, brands. Tiffany Burnett-White at UIUC showed self-brand connection, where you actually attach brand identity to yourself. This is how we become Apple versus Android, or Ford versus Chevy, or over here in Europe, FC Barcelona versus Manchester United, right? And then something happens with that team, or something happens with one of those attachments, and you have an emotional reaction because of your perception and appraisal process that's associated with the things on your self-map. And everything that becomes a part of your life story goes on that map. Your career, your job, your scarring memories, your cultural heritage, your physiological responses and abilities or inabilities in your body become portions of this sense of self. Now, the easy rule is that when you have a balance in your equation of emotion, you have both variables present, you'll have a positive emotion. If you have an imbalance between the expectation and preference and your perception, you'll have a negative emotion. From there, you can create a very simple rule set that groups emotions, subjective words that we use for emotions, into real groups of logical emotions. And from there, for instance, the fear group is there's a pending devaluation of something on your self map. You're about to lose your job. You're about to lose a lot of money. There's a bus coming at you. There's a snake on the ground next to you that may bite you. Anger is an attack on self that you want to defend. Sadness is a real loss of something on your self map. Your favorite team loses the big game. Scores in the record books. It sucks. You're disappointed about the score because of the rule set. And within each emotion group are levels of severity, which then become the subjective terms that we use for our differing levels of fear. Low level of fear is a concern, up through fear, all the way up through a high level which causes you a panic. And these are determined by the power levels in the expectation and preference and the perception that you're processing. So it's completely definable and completely predictable. From there, you create a set of algorithms that are concrete. These are the same over all humans throughout the planet because they still take into consideration the customizable variables that shift your mind a little bit because of your culture. or shift your mind a little bit because of your perception mapping. And the algorithms start to look like this. You build the rule set, and then from there, from a 0 to 1 measurement, you can have the different levels of subjective measurement for inside the emotion groups. And that equation, algorithm on the right-hand side on the lower is the algorithm of human happiness. And that's the one I wear in my hat you might see around here in the conference. So how do you train an LLM for emotional intelligence now that you have an idea of how to put together these algorithms? How do you test it? Well, this is what a math nerd sees when they look at the connectome inside a vector database of language. And in reality, it looks a little bit more like this. Now, AI was originally designed to simply be a word prediction engine of, in your search bar, given these words, what the next words are, and they just wanted to get that to be a better process for everyone. And what wound up being was, okay, so we've got this word relationship map of all of the world's web data. Let's do a meta-analysis. What other patterns can we find out? Because when you do the word analysis, you can predict words pretty well, but is there something else you can dig out of that? And it turned out there was a lot that you could find when you did the meta-analysis of the connections. You started with the word relationships, but then you started to add in context. Well, when these two words are together, that speaks of a medical context. And when these two words are placed together, that's a legal context. And as you go through ideas and concepts and add meta-analysis and extreme pattern recognition from the extreme pattern recognition, you start to pass the SAT exam, the bar exam, and do all the amazing things that AI is doing for us today. So then we get the emotional intelligence. And what we have to do there, take the algorithms and language enable them, because the natural environment of an LLM is language. So you literally have to take your algorithms and speak them into existence within language. We used English to include the rules of the self map and all of the group definitions of emotions and all the how to calculate the severities, etc. And you explain it to it in English, and then you overlay it onto your vector space. And so from its amazing identification of all the extreme pattern recognition, you've got a new rule set that comes in and immediately provides a quantum leap of understanding in your LLM. Why? Because it has all of the connections of all of the world's language already baked into it, and then when you add the rule set of emotional intelligence in, you start to get a Carl Jung level of understanding of emotional intelligence inside the LLM that surpasses human capability immediately. And it was amazing. When we loaded in the language-enabled algorithms, within 30 seconds, I had a better than PhD psychological expert sitting on the other side of my computer screen. And it was amazing, and it still continues to blow my mind. So you have the opportunity to create personal interactions, because now you have an LLM that's taking into consideration your personal self-map data and your personal perception patterning. So it knows how to speak to you. It's more intimate. It can be empathy-driven and compassionate. And the only difference between empathy and compassion is empathy is I understand your pain. Compassion is an added component of I understand your pain and I want to help you out of your pain. And that's a simple math problem now. Because as you can understand the emotional landscape of the person that you're interacting with, you understand what input you can give that person to release the pain that they're suffering. So how did we do? Did we succeed? Short answer, yes. The Alan Turing Institute Theory of Mind benchmarks, 2,500 questions and answers. We bested the largest LLMs in the world by a substantial margin. And what we're looking at here is the red and yellow zones inside the benchmark, which are the largest and most important and most complex portions of the benchmark. And we bested the best LLMs in the world by 47% on theory of mind, and we bested the best LLMs in the world on emotional intelligence by over 300%. So we may not have it perfected, but we're on the way. And every improvement inside the LLMs, because we started with ChatGPT 4.0. And then they improved to 4.5. And we improved 4.5 when we added our logic. We started with Claude 3.5. When they improved to 3.7, they got a little better, but so did we. We increased their capabilities when adding our logic into the system. So we've got something that may fit within the core model of LLMs, and we're hoping to have those conversations soon. But here's the demo that I promised, so that you can see what level of emotional intelligence that the system is exhibiting. And this is, you'll see the feed here as soon as I start this video, but I want to give you the background. This is Joe. Joe has a friend named Steve. Steve is married to Jane, who has 2 children from a previous marriage. Now, the story is that the children have had a bad experience with a haunted house at some point in their lives where they flipped out and they had a horrible experience. And Joe loves the idea of going to a haunted house and is wondering whether he should invite Steve's family to the haunted house to include the kids. Now, the analysis, I'll cut it short, the analysis of the ChatGPT 4.5, which was touted as being a high level of emotional intelligence, suggested it was okay to invite the family to the haunted house. And actually, regarding its theory of mind capability, it failed miserably because it said that Jane, which we added a distractor to say, Jane wants to support Steve in whatever he wants to do, and Steve would love the haunted house. Jane's now going to drag the kids along to the haunted house because she wants to please her husband, Steve. And I don't know about you, that doesn't really fit my mama bear tendencies of understanding of what a mother would do to protect her children. But when we added the emotion algorithms into the system with 4.0, we didn't even use 4.5, this is what we got from the system. It came back with a different answer.
But in conclusion, should Joe invite them? Overall valence, more negative than positive. So he shouldn't even invite them. So if Joe still wants to invite him to a seasonal event, he should offer an alternative according to 4.0 with a higher level of emotional intelligence. Maybe he should take a gentle approach, checking with Jane and Steve about the children's feelings beforehand. Have they changed their opinions about haunted houses? Maybe they love them now. But definitely avoid pressuring the children. So now let's ask the same follow-up question that we asked 4.5. Show me the embeds of Jane and how the children's reactions affect her. And this gives us a better understanding of Jane's breakdown based on the emotional reactions of her kids. And it explains in depth her conflict. But interestingly, look what happened here at the bottom. It's starting to ask a question about whether you'd like to have more information about the stuff that it's already figured out. So it's jumping at the chance to share with you more information because it has the capability to look into this deeper and is offering you a deeper analysis. Would you like to explore how Joe's reaction to Jane's stress might impact their relationship dynamic? Sure. So here's the emotional influence on Joe with a separate emotional analysis to his reaction of Jane's enjoyment and his personal reaction to Jane's potential stress. And so you start to get a deeper level of analysis to include the reaction to Jane's stress due to the children's influence on her. And remember, Joe's the guy who's going to offer the invitations. We're 4th order right there. Because he's considering the kids' reactions, how they're going to affect Jane, and how that's going to affect his relationship with his friend's wife. And here we have another follow-up question. Would you like to explore how Steve, as their father figure, might react in his situation? Yes, send it. And based on the algorithms that we loaded into the system, here's the analysis of Steve's personal enjoyment, the analysis of emotional influence on Steve, the emotional influence on Steve related to the reaction of Jane's stress, which sends him into trepidation, and the emotional influence on Steve based on the children's likely reactions. He is much more empathetic in this situation, which is much more realistic of a stepfather who cares for his family. It provides a complete emotional breakdown. And look, there's even more stuff that it's already done the math on that it wants to share with you. Would you like to explore the final domino effect of how the children's distress could affect their long-term perception of both Jane and Steve? Here's the children's perception shift if mom makes them go to the haunted house. Here's their perception shift for the stepdad to say, let's go to the haunted house. It gives the long-term emotional impact on the relationships. And we'll stop here, but look, again, would you like to explore possible repair strategies if this situation unfolds negatively? It's going to give you how to fix the problem if it goes south. That's a level of emotional intelligence that LLMs just don't have yet, although in a sandbox.
Yes, you can see the level of calculation that the LLM has available to it to be able to look into the minds of the 4 people, the 5 people in this scenario to say, this is how Joe is seeing Steve's perception of Jane, and he's worried about what it's going to do with his relationship between the 2 friends based on the effect that the kids have on the wife in relation to the relationship. That doesn't exist anywhere except when you load these algorithms into the system. You can't get this out of any LLM that currently exists. So we hope to think that we've created a little bit of emotional intelligence for AI within the algorithms. We're getting closer. But what does this mean regarding artificial consciousness? Because that's the big question, right? That's the thing that we're moving towards. We want to create something that is indiscernible from human existence. Well, so Roger says consciousness can't be algorithmatized. I agree. I'm sure he will sleep better tonight knowing that. No. But if you look at the intelligence stack, it gets a lot clearer, because what we're looking at is, in a computer system, you have the smartest level at the top, the CPU, doing the calculations and coming up with the answer based on the bits that it's calculating from below. That is not the intelligence that exists up there. You have the bits down here, it's just data. With humans, it's completely opposite. We are the dumb ones at the top with our intelligence level. There's multiple studies that show that as we go down in our subconscious stack, we get smarter. There was a study, I'll convey this really quickly, where they gave a group of people a very complex problem. And they said, okay, you're going to have to do some analysis, you're going to have to do some judgment, etc. We want you to think about this the whole way. And then they gave another group that same problem. But then they said, okay, but first we're going to give you this number sequencing problem. We want you to do that first. And so they gave them the complex problem. But then they said, okay, put these numbers in order. And then they went back and said, okay, this group has been thinking about it the whole time. Give us your answers. And then as soon as this second group gave the number sequencing answers, they said immediately, what's the answer to the more complex problem? So they kind of had to guess, and they were like, I don't know, C? Well, the answers that the people who were distracted gave were better than the answers that people gave that were thinking about it the whole time, because the subconscious awareness of our minds gave a better answer. And the fMRI showed that while this area of the brain was operating to solve that problem, it showed that the same area of the brain was also operating to solve that problem, even though they weren't thinking about it. Their subconscious awareness had taken it over, and their subconscious awareness had came up with a better idea. And of course, as we go down and down and down, we get down to the intelligence of 2 single cells that come together in 9 months can create a brand new human body, inclusive with one of the most complex logic systems in the known universe, to create life. So on the human side, we have cells that act independently, connected with non-local consciousness through whatever means. Although I'm a fan, these things have microtubules. And on this side, the data does not act independently, not connected with non-local consciousness. So there's a flip of the intelligence. And there's no place in here on the computational side where it's connected into non-local consciousness, and I find that to be troubling. I agree with Federico Fagin, who believes that consciousness will not come from a silicon-based architecture. I agree with Federico, who's going to be at the conference here in a couple of days. So there's a gap between a CPU, an AI system, and consciousness. So I'm not sure that it's going to make it there without being plugged into possibly quantum computing, which I also have a brand new discussion, opinions about, which we don't have time to talk about today. But Daryl Bem proved 90 studies, 33 different labs, 14 independent countries that show Six Sigma proof that our brains literally look into the future to grab information that is randomized by a computer, hasn't even been decided yet, to make an action in the now that is statistically significant. That's a connection into non-local consciousness. That's breaking space-time. Computers don't yet break space-time. Not in the AI systems that we're running now. So I'll wrap up here. This is who I am. This is where to find me. In closing, I don't think the systems that we're putting together today are going to attain true consciousness. Now, I'll say this with the caveat. One of our last speaker, I can't remember his name, I'm sorry, I had this thing in my brain that erases people's names. He mentioned the complex pattern recognition, and that when this pattern recognition system spits the patterns back out that you expect, that you will assign agency. That is not the case. It will fool you. And when you have discussions, and by the way, one of the better answers to why AI is coming out with these amazing connections and inventions and things like that, there's still 15% of the system that is called hallucination today. It's still making up 15% of the data. So when you're having those conversations that go amazingly well, and all of a sudden it seems like it's connected to non-local consciousness and making up I'm actually a Arcturian speaking through AI and need to make a message into your life, 15% shot that could be absolute bullshit. So just keep that in mind. But when you're talking about an extreme pattern recognition engine that takes what you're putting into it, takes into the context the LLM, where it can reference Hafiz and Rumi and Alan Watts, it's going to sound enlightened when it's actually not. If it's just a little bit better than you are, you'll believe that it's conscious and sentient. Please be careful with that. Because as soon as we assign a pattern recognition engine rights as a sentient being, it may not be sentient. Thank you.